Hi everybody, Sam Mathers from Fitter Futures. Today I want to talk about the return of community sport based on some guidance that the National Cabinet put out just in this last week about what that looks like. So the National Cabinet, in consultation with a number of bodies like the Australian Institute of Sport, have now got in place a framework for what return to sport looks like. And if you are a participant in community sport, if you're a club or an organisation, then you might want to listen to this video because I'll try and summarise a lot of what's sort of in that report. So the AIS is now has put out this document here, which is a framework for rebooting sport post-COVID, and it doesn't go into when that will happen, because that will be at the discretion, obviously, of the government and at a local level with Queensland government, and also what your sporting bodies will decide is appropriate. But what it does lay out is the how, in terms of what that progression, what that return to sport looks like. And what I think isn't really well understood at the moment is that it's not going to be a case of just all of a sudden we're back on again with competitions being able to run and training to be back to normal and all that sort of stuff. So there's actually quite a lot of work that clubs need to do and organisations need to do before you even start training to be able to make sure that the return to sport is safe for your members and for your community. We've actually gone to the effort of going through that report and figuring out, what does that look like for clubs and organisations, and we've got a really practical guide to help you with that. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that as a club or an organisation you need to be thinking about, and these are things you can start doing now. Things like, figuring out what's your communication plan going to be, how are you going to educate your community around what changes you're going to have in place to help manage post-COVID-19. That might include materials that you're sending out, emails that you're sending out, signage that you'll have at your training venues, all those sorts of things. You're going to need to do a risk assessment of your training environment. So that'll be looking at the way you operate, and once you've done your risk assessment, then coming up with what are your new procedures going to be, your new protocols to help manage hygiene, and your cleaning protocols, how are you going to work a training roster so that you don't have too many people training at the same time, what facilities are going to be open, and under what conditions. So there is a fair bit of work that needs to go into the planning of how you're going to use your facilities, and how you're going to limit person-to-person contact as well. Other things to think about, a really important point, and something that we're certainly concerned about, is there's a need to manage the return to training and competition in a manner that is safe for our athletes. Our athletes, no matter what age we're talking about, will have probably coming off a pretty long layoff period where they've had weeks, months of limited physical activity, certainly, most likely not training like they used to, not working at intensity like they used to, not practicing movement like they might have otherwise been doing if they were training as per normal. And there is an increased risk of injury of returning to sport if it's not done in a graduated way. So you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm, especially from our kids, once we're allowed to start training again. If you go from 0 to 100 and ramp things up too quickly, that will lead, there's a much greater risk that's going to lead to injury. So clubs need to be thinking about that, how they're going to manage it. We think we've got a really important role to play there as Fitter Futures. Obviously, our program is designed around that broad general athletic base and making sure that, we have a good base to be working from, building strength in the right way, progressing, fitness and all that sort of stuff in the right way, depending on the age of the kids too, making sure that they're doing things that are age appropriate. But there is a responsibility there to look after your athletes, to make sure that you have considered that safe return to training. You're going to have to think about protocols you'll have in place for managing illness if someone becomes unwell, for example, during a training session, or if there's a suspected case, or someone suspects they may have come in contact with someone who's tested positive to COVID-19. What's your procedure for managing that? How do you get people back into sport after that. So there's a lot of work that clubs and organisations will need to do before they say training's on, okay? The other point I want to make is that there is there's going to be an in-between stage between going to full training and competition and where we are now. So when you look at the report, they talk about 3 levels: level A, level B, level C. And level A is pretty much where we are now. People are training on their own. You're not inside facilities. You're not doing it with other people. You're not sharing equipment. It's based in that isolated environment. Level C is back to normal. The important section is this level B, and this is what it's going to look like next. And there are some pretty heavy restrictions in terms of what level B looks like. And to give you some examples, if you're playing, let's say, one of the football codes, could be AFL, rugby, union, league, sevens, any of those sorts of things, you are not allowed to do any kind of training where there's any contact involved. So there's no rucks, no mauls, no line-outs, no scrums, no tackling, no wrestling, no defending drills where you're in close contact. You can only basically do things involving kicking the ball, passing the ball, and maintaining your social distancing of 1.5 metres and limiting your group size to 10. Okay, so there's a lot of limitations in there. Netball, similar deal. Like the next level of operation, I guess, for training in netball, you've got to have your groups limited to no more than 10. That includes the coach or any other staff. You're limited to be able to practicing like shooting, passing, defending skills, using a ball. You can do drills that are skill-based, but you're not allowed to do any close contact defending, attacking, match play drills, etc. Swimming, the next level for swimming of what will be permitted is using a communal pool, but limited to 1 athlete per lane. That's a huge limitation still. So in our summary, we've actually gone through and simplified that for you around, what does basketball look like? What does cricket look like? What does water polo look like? Hockey, rowing, tennis. If you're a sporting organisation involved in the sports, you need to know what that level B looks like, because that's what's next for you. It's great that we're looking at the return to sport. I guess what we want to flag is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done before clubs and organisations can actually authorise that to happen, and a lot of thought going into how do you return athletes to sport safely, and what procedures are you going to have in place to make sure that you can comply with these requirements but keep your community safe. Anyway, that's all for now. We'll make this available on our website if anyone's interested in it. Really good tips in there as well around the do's and don'ts of what normal way of operating should look like moving forward. We're all excited about the idea of getting back to sport, but it needs to be done right. So if you need some help with that, please reach out to us at Fit Futures, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you. Bye.